Hello and welcome everybody to the 5th episode of the Void Wave podcast. And today we're back to doing a little movie review. And the movie we're going to have a look at today is Last Exit to Brooklyn, which was directed by Uli Edel, a German filmmaker, in 1989.
Yeah, so the pessimist philosopher Julio Cabrera mentioned on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast that his crucial idea was that cinema creates concepts through images, constituting an alternative, non-academic way of doing philosophy. And then he said that if cinema can think philosophically through images, then antinatalist, and I guess by extension pessimistic concepts, can be created by the same mechanisms as any other concept. And this got me thinking, because he also said that if there's such a thing as pessimist cinema or pessimistic cinema, it would be something that focus, films that show the dark and terrible face of human life, to quote Cabrera himself. So we picked this not very uplifting film to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, if there is such a thing as pessimistic cinema, I think this movie definitely qualifies because it's not a not very upbeat movie.
No, not at all. Although it does have a happy ending. So as usually,
yeah, in a way, it has. Yeah.
In a way. So as usual, we're gonna spoil this film completely. So if you want to watch it and don't like knowing the ending or bits about it or twists, be sure to kind of switch off and watch the movie and then come back. So we're actually doing like a sort of a double feature. So we're starting this week with Last Exit to Brooklyn. The next week we'll do Requiem for a Dream. Both these movies are adaptations of novels by Hubert Selby Jr. He was an American writer. He was born in 1928 in Brooklyn. Both of these movies are set in Brooklyn, and the stories are set in Brooklyn. He was pretty much, until he started writing and making a living from writing, he was like, I would say, completely working class. He was part of the merchant marine and then got tuberculosis, so he was bedridden, always in poor health, difficulties to keep a job. And because he spent so much time at home because of his poor health, he got to meet a lot of his neighbors and see things that happen in his neighborhoods in Brooklyn. So he got to meet like lots of longshoremen, the homeless, thugs, pimps, prostitutes, homosexuals, drug addicts, and kind of a mix of a working class and what in class analysis would call lumpen proletariat. And I guess if you read the books, and this comes across in the movies, of course, you'll definitely get a tone of voice and how these people at that specific period of time, so kind of post World War II Brooklyn, how they talked, acted, how the things they desired and the fears they had, etc., etc.
Yeah, I haven't read either of the books, and I actually went into this movie completely blind, so I didn't really know what to expect and stuff. But afterwards, while doing a little bit of research on Selby's biography, and it felt as though like his own life experiences definitely served as an inspiration for either of the movies, and I'm assuming for the books as well, of course. And the novel came out in 1964, as he said, and it was very controversial when it came out. Like there was, I think, court cases in both the US as well as in the UK because of the movie's content, the novel's content. I'm sorry, was called pornography and very obscene, and I think the novel was also banned completely in Italy when it came out. Yeah.
Yeah, and as usual with these kind of censorship, the more you ban it, the more popular it gets, right? I think that definitely contributed for the popularity of the novel and kind of getting Selby's career launched properly and made him like a full-time writer and somebody that was kind of read. I mean, obviously this content, nowadays in 2020, people wouldn't blink, right, at something like this. I mean, it's still very powerful, but nobody would call it pornography, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, neither. I would also say that even though sexual themes and sex are very big themes of the movie, and I'm assuming the novel as well, like it never felt like actually pornographic to me, at least. Like it didn't feel like there's sex in the movie just to make people aroused or whatever. Like that's just not the context in which sex occurs in this movie.
I mean, I can tell you from the novel, it's described in a very matter-of-fact way, right? This happened and then that happened, and then the dialogue really carries the book, I can tell you. I mean, because the language they use and the kind of the abbreviations and the poor grammar, I guess, in when the people are speaking in the novel and in the movie, it's all on the paper as well. So about the movie, I think the first thing that hits me, at least, about the movie is that even though the story is realistic, in my opinion, it's kind of day-to-day things and kind of the everyday of that part of Brooklyn and this kind of working class, mix of working class and lumpen proletariat type people. But the way it's shot in a very kind of fantasy type way, because it's in this part of town where you have like a sort of a shipping yard, and then some derelict bars, and kind of a lot of kind of waste ground and areas with kind of the cars that are wrecked, and lots of rubbish and garbage everywhere, and then there's all this smoke and these big lights. So at the beginning, I mean, if somebody told me this was the beginning to Grease, I would believe, right? and
it kind of has the Grease vibe going on. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, with the hairstyles and everybody's kind of, not everybody, but most of the people are kind of they look good. They're kind of good looking people, I would say, and so I guess the style is a way that doesn't really match the story of the content, but maybe that's good, because I think if everything matched the story and how grim the story is and the various plots, I think maybe the movie would be too much to bear.
Yeah, I mean, the movie definitely has some realism to it, like in the sense that it was, these stories of these characters that we are following were probably inspired by, actually real people that, Selby met when he was living in Brooklyn. And yeah, it's like the style of the movie is I wouldn't exactly call it like fantastical, but it's theatrical in a way. Like you're dealing with these characters who are to some extent stand-ins for certain stereotypes of people, and I don't mean stereotype in a bad way. So maybe it's more archetypes and stereotypes. And yeah, I mean, about how the movie is shot. Like one of the things that I enjoyed most are these little wide shots you have interspersed throughout the movie, where the camera's just lingering on or panning over the urban environment and the urban landscape of this really, really dark and rundown part of town, basically, and that really helps to set the tone of the movie, I think.
Yeah. So
and that gives it also this maybe a little bit more fantastical feel to it, or hyper realistic.
Yeah, it's almost like these people are trapped in a movie set in sometimes, like that street, which kind of a lot of the stuff happens in that street, right? And there's a feel like that's a movie set. I mean, it might even be a movie set, as far as I know.
I checked where they shot, and I think they shot some stuff on location in actual Brooklyn, but then they also shot a lot of stuff in Germany, in the Bavarian film studios in Munich. So it's probably a combination of actual set pieces and real footage from Brooklyn.
Yeah, so I guess the beginning kind of sets the tone and the kind of opposition of the forces that are present in the movie. So on one side you have these working class people who are doing extremely, as you said, kind of archetypical working class things. They're on a strike, right? So they're holding a picket line in front of the place where they work. And then you have these soldiers and kind of who are, of course, employed by the government. And most of them are in this military base in Brooklyn. And I think they're waiting to be shipped out to the Korean War. And then, of course, you have cops. And then you have a bit of what nowadays we'd call the professional managerial class. So sort of kind of this, what the Americans call the middle class, I guess. And then you have the lumpenproletariat, which is basically kind of people with odd jobs, or just I don't know best to describe them, a gang of bandits, I guess.
Yeah, they are like small time thugs who also do the occasional odd job.
Yeah, apparently. And then a prostitute called Tralala, and then a group of, for want of a better description, and bear in mind this is set in Brooklyn in 1952, homosexuals / transvestites who kind of hang together for kind of mutual support, but who also prostitute themselves, I think, because they were
I think they are also sex workers.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
So it's interesting because I really don't think Hubert Selby Jr. with his background was a Marxist or had kind of any concept of kind of an intellectual class analysis or anything like this. But the way he lays out these groups, it's pretty much say, well, these are representatives of this class, these are representatives of that class, and so on and so forth. And it's quite clear how these are laid out straight away from the beginning of the movie.
Oh yeah, and I'd also say that like these characters and the archetypes that they are representing, they're mostly characterized by two things. For one, and that's probably the most important thing, is how they make their living, like whether they are factory workers or the small-time thugs or sex workers or soldiers, sailors, cops, etc. And secondly, like their sense of identity, whether it's class identity or sexual identity or gender identity. And really the only big identity group or Ep5 group that's missing from the movie is racial identity, really.
Yeah.
Which kind of stuck out to me. I think this is in the opening scene. There's like one of the soldiers. They got into the conflict with the gang of thugs, and he's hurling a racial slur at them. I think twice or maybe 3 times or something like that. Like he's calling them like N-word lovers or something like that, and that's really the only reference to race that the whole movie makes.
Yeah, I think you don't see a black person in the whole movie, even as an extra. They just.
I think there's one.
There might be.
There's exactly one scene. There's one scene where you see like an elderly black lady in the background as an extra. I think it's the scene where like Tralala is at the harbor when her soldier boyfriend guy gets shipped out. I think in that scene you see actually a black person in the background, but that's the only scene in the movie, I think, where there's a black person present. And I'm not really sure if this is just a historic accuracy thing. Like I really don't know what the racial makeup of this part of Brooklyn in the 1950s was, but I'm assuming that it's just because the movie was made in the late 80s and black representation in movies just wasn't really a big thing back then.
Yeah, but I think the reason there's no kind of black people appearing in these movies also because these groups that we see form, they pretty much have lots of contempt for each other, right? And I think if you had a group of a black person appear, they would have to be a representative of their own group, right?
True.
Yeah. Because
that would make the movie a little bit more complicated, and there's also like I should have researched this, but I don't know how heavily segregated Brooklyn was in the 1950s. Maybe that's an explanation. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because when we talk about class analysis and we go, all right, the white working class, right? And what people are referring is to these ancestors of the white working class, which is kind of the working class in this movie, which is basically they all dress the same, they all have the same lifestyle, they like the same things, they have the same skin color, they probably come like from specific identities they identify as, say, Polish or Italian or something like that, all European, right? And right. They all have the same aspirations and etc. etc. It's a very uniform group of people, not just their job but everything else.
I mean, it makes sense, like from a standpoint of class analysis, because like their identity is, in a way, it's a product of how they're making the living, what their material conditions are, to use the Marxist term there. So yeah, I guess it makes sense. And we already mentioned that working class struggle. There's a big strike action going on basically throughout the whole movie. And you get a little bit of interaction between the workers and their trade union that is representing them, which is of course very interesting because the 1950s were like the height of what we now call McCarthyism, or the second Red Scare, which was a political climate in which there was heavy political repression against anything remotely left-wing, right?
Yeah.
It was also the beginning, or shortly after the beginning, of the Cold War politics and the bloc formation and stuff like that. So that plays a big part in the movie. The Korean War, which you also already mentioned, which was going on between 1950 and 1953, which is also referenced a number of times in the movie, especially with the soldier characters, of course. Then sex and violence is also one of the major themes of the movie, and there's two pretty heavy scenes right at the climax of the movie, which have to do with sex and violence, which we're gonna get into later. Then trans and gay issues, of course, and especially on with the trans characters. While watching the movie, I wasn't exactly sure whether or not they were meant to be transgender or whether or not they were meant to be cross-dressers.
Yeah.
And that's really unclear from like a contemporary perspective, I guess. It's not really clear because my assumption is that back in the day, people they didn't care whether it's transgender or cross-dressing.
Yeah, I think that's the point of view of a white cis male straight guy writing this in 1964, right? About a memory from 10 years ago, or the people he used to live around 10 years ago, right? So right. If you're outside, because there was a lot of segregation, right? Even on gender identity and sexuality, and if you belong to the kind of the straight cis male group, you would just lump everything that was different from you into this other group, right? So it's a bit of a mix, right?
Yeah, it's just not very clear from the movie.
Yeah, but you were talking about unions, and I actually pulled a chart on this, and actually the late 40s and up until the kind of late 50s, that was the highest strength of the unions in the United States. They got up to 35%, 36% of union membership across all workers, right? And nowadays in the United States, it's 11%.
Yeah, it's probably down across the board, like the same as here in Europe, pretty much. Yeah. Which probably was a result of policies like the McCarthyism doctrine and what was it called, the Truman Doctrine.
Yeah, but I found it interesting how everybody kind of stuck to their people, right, and found comfort in those people that were kind of closer to them. And basically, any attempts at stepping outside your class were heavily punished by the story, by the plot, right? Because one of the major characters is called Harry Black, and he's a union shop steward, so he's in charge of the strike office. So he's there at the strike office pretty much all day, and he has other people who come to the picket line, and he kind of stamps their little what you call them, like cards, to say, yes, this person came to the picket line as they were supposed to, and he kind of has beer for everybody, and he has an expense account. So by all accounts, he's like, he's married, white, with a wife and a young child. He acts and dresses like all the other white working class people, but he doesn't fit his identity, or the identity that was given to him, I guess. And because he doesn't fit, he's going to step outside and he's going to be punished for it, and severely punished for it by the story.
He's one of the most tragic characters in the movie, probably. Yeah, he's also a factory worker there, obviously, and a strike leader, as you said. But he doesn't exactly do a very good job at being a strike leader.
No.
He squanders a lot of the resources the union provides his office with, like the expense account and stuff, and he spends it on alcohol and taking out people he's dating and stuff.
Yeah.
Which later on comes back to him.
Yeah. So his story is that he's very frustrated with the identity that he got, right? That he got from birth, I would say, because he was born into kind of those conditions that said, well, you're gonna work in a factory, you're gonna marry young, have a child, be straight, etc., etc. But unfortunately for him, given the conditions where he lives, he's very vain. He wants like everybody to like him, and he's I would say, given the kind of unclear politics of the movie or kind of sexual politics, I would say he's a homosexual himself.
Oh, yeah, at least bisexual, but
yeah.
I think it's pretty clear that he's supposed to be a gay man.
Yeah, closeted, very heavily closeted, right? So we can imagine that, given the group of people that are his peers, that none of them would admit to being gay in public, right? They would just they would just get married, have their relationship, be miserable their whole lives, and then hopefully that's over for them soon.
Yeah, and that's pretty much his life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he has a wife and a kid, but both of them are pretty much absent from the movie. I think they're in like three or four scenes in total. And whenever he is shown at their apartment, he's very absent. Like he neglects his wife, and in one scene he's outright violent towards her. And there's also a couple scenes where he looks at the baby, and the expression on his face doesn't exactly look joyful, right?
Yeah.
So he's estranged from his family.
He followed this kind of class, the script for his class, and it was a complete non-fit for him as a person. So he one day he spots what I considered a trans woman, I would say, in his neighborhood, and he gets kind of fascinated with her, and by chance he ends up in this sort of brothel. Well, it's kind of an apartment that a bunch of gay or transgender women share, and he ends up kind of falling in love with one of them, right? And that's kind of where his troubles begin.
Yeah, that's also like the moment where, like, it appeared to me he first discovered that he has like his homosexuality, maybe, and he immediately falls in love with this woman, Regina.
Yeah,
this trans woman. I'm just gonna call her a trans woman from now on.
Yeah. So in theory he's not gay. Okay, he's a straight man who seems to be almost exclusively attracted to effeminate men, or in this case a trans woman. It's very unclear, sorry for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could also call her is it Regina or no, that's a different trans character that gets called a boy. But for sake of discussion, let's just assume she's a trans woman.
Yeah, and what I found interesting in their relationship is, of course, there's the kind of the forbidden sexual relationship between them, even though that's not shown explicitly in the movie by any means. But what I found interesting in that character, is that she kind of belongs to a different world from his. So she's not like in this working class group that was very homogenous. So she's somebody who lives in outside Brooklyn, or it seems it's outside Brooklyn, and she goes like to the best restaurants and to the best clubs, and she's always kind of finding somebody like a client to sponsor her, right, to pay for her stuff.
She lives like how would you say that, like a dandy lifestyle.
Yeah,
like she's always very well dressed, and goes to expensive restaurants and stuff. And
what I found interesting about Harry kind of stepping outside of this kind of working class background is that not only is he stepping into this kind of forbidden relationship with somebody to him of the same sex and gender, he's also kind of stepping into a different social class, right? Because all of a sudden he's burning through the expense account from his union and kind of going to all these fancy places and buying better clothes. In fact, it's referred that he spent the expense money on a nice tie, for example. And it's like he's taking like a holiday from his working class background. But as I said, the movie punishes everybody who tries to step outside their class. And it goes really badly for poor Harry.
Oh, yeah. He spends the night with this woman, Regina, or crossdresser Regina. And because of that, he isn't at the strike at a very crucial point in time, when the factory owners, I guess, try to break the picket line, right? And he's supposed to be there because he's the strike leader. And because he isn't, after that because of that and because, him squandering the expense account comes out, he gets fired from his position as the strike leader, which was very important to him because he's shown throughout the movie as very boastful, almost, of his position, right? That he's somebody important in this strike movement, and that gets all taken away from him just because he followed who he is, essentially, right?
Yeah, and then he tries to kind of come back to being to his old persona, but he just cannot, right? So in the end, a lot of bad stuff happens to him, which I think is inconsequential, but not inconsequential to him, but inconsequential to an analysis of the movie. But it's funny that it's almost like the movie saying, this is who you're born as, and this is how you're gonna live your life, and don't you dare come outside of it, or you'll be punished. And punished he is. Speaking about the strike, I found it kind of not pretty cool to have a strike on film, which is not something that appears very frequently. And there was a lot about these people being in strike for 6 months and the hardships of being in it and the kind of hardships of not being paid, but everybody kind of sticking together through the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's one big scene where like a fight breaks out between the strikers and like the police and the private security, I guess we could call it, hired by the factory owners. And a lot of the stuff you see there on screen is very much like the kind of pictures you see today on television when you look at the protests and riots going on in the US right now. It's police using water cannons and beating up protesters. And it's very similar imagery. I guess a little bit more, a bit less modern, of course.
Yeah, although the police in this movie is very kind of basic compared to the kind of equipment the police has these days, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're not running around in tanks and shit, but
yeah, or shooting people, like with actual guns.
I mean, they're shooting tear gas, I think,
yeah.
in the movie too. But
yeah,
no real guns.
But it's funny because the strikers, they all have like their gas masks. There's even like a dog with a gas mask.
Oh yeah,
in the movie. So it looks like the union kind of has got like that strike really well organized. Like everybody's got like a piece of wood to use as a club to beat the cops, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Whereas
they also have like a drawer at the strike office with a bunch of knuckle dusters, which are pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I guess the guy who is the representative of the union, he was talking to me. I think he's called Boyce. He's there to coordinate the strike and of course to do the negotiations with the factory ownership. And he's like a very no bullshit kind of character, I think.
Yeah, and
like
very
he's also
inspiring,
and he's one of the few characters in the movie who doesn't have a subplot which involves sex.
Yeah,
which is interesting. And yeah, he just seems like the kind of guy who does what he thinks has to be done in order to achieve the goal, right? And he's also shown to not be shying away from playing it dirty, so to speak, because there's one scene after their picket line has been broken, and he hires what's his name? I think he's called Winnie. He's kind of the leader of this little thug gang that's hanging out at the strike office a lot, and he basically hires them to burn the trucks which are used to transport the goods from the factory.
Yeah.
So he's not exactly a moral character, but he's just a he's a man of action, so to speak.
He seems kind of selfless in what he does, right? He seems.
He seems very, very rational and focused.
Yeah.
Like that's the way I would describe him. Like his whole character is basically the union representative, and that's all we get to know about him.
Yeah. So coming back to that theme of class, it's funny that when there's the workers on the picket line, and as soon as the cops arrive, their reaction is these people are our enemy, right? Whereas, after, 70 years of propaganda around cops, most workers wouldn't see the cops arriving as a bad thing, which is like a neutral, or maybe they're just going to look after to make sure nothing gets out of hand. But these workers in the 50s America, with union memberships close to 40%, they see the cops arrive and their instant reaction is, these are our enemy. And they have absolutely no problems in getting a piece of wood and hitting a cop over the head with it. It's the immediate reaction. They don't even try to be friendly to the cops or anything. They just go after them.
Yeah, it certainly was like a different social climate back then. But it's also probably true that in terms of class consciousness, I guess you can call it, that that has kind of gone away by now under the propaganda and the, how would you call it, like the atomization of the workforce. Like there's not, as you said, like union membership is down across the board when compared to back to the 50s. And, people also workers today, they don't necessarily perceive themselves as having their interests aligned with other workers who are maybe not necessarily doing the same kind of job.
Yeah. But I guess in this case, it wouldn't be hard to be united like that because, literally everybody else around you is like you, right? They share so much.
Basically, the whole neighborhood is basically working in this factory. At least it seems that way. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's also another plot. I mean, this movie is all kind of subplots. I don't think there's like a main story at all. It's like the sort of vignettes of things happening during a limited period of time.
Yeah, it's like a lot of separate stories that are all kind of glued together by a sense of place and time. It's all happening in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, and there's a sort of a much softer story than all of these, which is about this girl. I think she's like in her 20s, because I think her age is mentioned 23 or 26 at some point. And she's the daughter of one of the workers on strike, and she's pregnant, several months pregnant, and that part of the plot is purely kind of I would say a sort of a comic relief, I would say, to the whole thing. But I
think that's sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we have to think that the way this book was written, a lot of these were like separate short stories that then were published separately and then were made into a sort of a single book, a single novel, right? So this story doesn't really fit the theme, in my opinion, of everything else. I mean, it fits like the place and time, and some of the characters are the same. But there's also this story about this girl. She's called Donna, and she's pregnant, and her father can't believe it. She says she's fat and she's a virgin, but actually he's only half right.
Her father, what's his name? Big Joe, I think. Like, he's a bit of a dum-dum.
Yeah, he is.
He's not exactly the smartest guy, but he's very charming. Like the way he's portrayed, I think. And he finds out about the pregnancy of his daughter basically right before her water breaks, and she goes into labor. And he doesn't know how to deal with it at first, and then what he does is he tries to find out who the father is, of course. And turns out the father is one of his co-workers from the factory, who's called Tommy. And he after like a union meeting, he confronts Tommy and tries to beat him up, essentially. And after that, Tommy kind of gets more or less coerced into marrying Donna.
Yeah, but he's coerced in a way, but also what are his options, right?
Right. I mean, he also doesn't seem to have that big of a problem.
Yeah.
It's just, it didn't really occur to him before that maybe, hey, I should marry this girl.
Yeah, but he's one of the workers, the white workers, right? Who all live in the same area. So if he said, no, I'm not gonna be the parent to this child, I'm not gonna get married, he would be cast out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They would get him fired and kicked out of the union, etc., etc. I think what this movie shows is that kind of there's benefits to being united in this kind of very close group, class group, I would say, an identity group, but then at the same in the same way, it's very bad if you're cast out, because then you become, one of the other people, right?
And you're basically you basically get demoted, quote unquote, to lumpen proletariat status.
Yeah.
Which are the social rejects, I guess.
Yeah, the ones who kind of fall through the cracks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're a man, you wear this hat, and there's a scene like when they're striking, and like everybody has the same hat and the same coat. I mean, not exactly the same, but pretty much the same, right? And
it's still pretty uniform and immediately recognizable as working class people.
Yeah, and then at home you wear a white vest that everybody seems to wear one. And, the women are housewives. And, if there's a woman out at night by themselves, they're a prostitute 100%. There's no other option. So, Tommy, he's the father. At least that's what the mother says. The mother-to-be says. And he has basically two options, right? Either he continues being who he is, in which case he needs to marry, or if he says no, then he needs to become something else. And the something else, in this case, is not nice, right? Because you can't just become middle class, right? And the other option would be to become like a sort of an outlaw thug, like that group that hangs out near the docks.
Yeah, either that or running away or something like that, right? And that's on the topic of like coercion, when I said he gets coerced into marriage, it's not that like they're threatening his life or whatever. It's just that the way this community of workers works is almost like an extended family, basically. Yeah. So there's like social pressure on him to marry, because like this marriage is also not really portrayed as a love marriage. Like it's more of a pragmatic matter almost, because it's about economically supporting, the soon-be mother and the child, of course.
Yeah, and also kind of extending your network, right?
Right.
The people who can support you in case things go badly for you, right? If you need a job, or you need somebody to put in a good word to get a job somewhere, or to join the union, etc., right? So it just becomes like a very convenient way of living, which is what you could say is Tommy's material conditions, right? He's just kind of following the path that's laid out for him.
True. I mean, there's a nice little scene like right at the end of the movie where like the strike is over at that point and the factory is about to reopen, and Joe he's giving like some advice, or I guess he offers some advice to Tommy, and another guy walks by and asks him, "Hey, how's your wife? How's your child?" And then he says, "Oh, the baby is crying a lot and it's shitting a lot. It's great." Which I really loved at the point, because that's kind of I think what that particular subplot was about. It's about natality and how the conditions that one is born into will determine large parts of your life, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, neither of them. Neither of them planned to be parents, right?
Yeah, we don't know about Donna, but she doesn't really have a voice in the movie. I think she has like 2 or 3 lines, and she's mostly just there to be the becoming mother and becoming wife. But it's like the way she reacts to her pregnancy. It's I think it's pretty clear that she didn't intend to get pregnant.
Yeah, but otherwise, if she didn't become a wife, what else could she become, right?
Right. I mean, that's basically her destiny almost, like in those sort of conditions.
Yeah.
And this subplot is also the only one where religious identity plays a little bit of a role, because Joe's family and Donna, they are Catholics, and there's like a baptism scene in a Catholic church, and that scene is interesting because it's very hard to describe. It's very heavenly, I guess. It's all very pristine, and there's bright colors and bright light and stuff, and that is a very, very stark contrast from the rest of the movie, which is quite ugly, I guess you can say.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the film is a bit moralist, right? Because the people who kind of follow their script and who kind of do good things sort of get a reward of sorts in the end, and at least things didn't go badly for them, right? The strike is over, they can go back to work, and they got their conditions accepted by the company, I think. But I was thinking about this a lot, if the film was really kind of tried to moralize too much. But then I thought about the thugs, right? and the thugs spend the whole movie doing bad stuff to people, and in the end, nothing happens to them, right?
That's true. Yeah, they just walk away.
Yeah, they just have lots of fun pretty much during the whole movie. You know, they feel like beating up this guy, the soldier, and they beat him up. They don't even steal his money; they just do it for fun, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then they beat Harry later because he was trying to rape a child, and they beat him up just for fun. They don't take his money either. Then they have all sorts of schemes where they make money. Some they don't make. They like this force that's completely set aside from work or any kind of moral responsibility for their actions or family, any kind of values. They just hover kind of outside of everything.
Yeah,
driven
that's like a thing about the lumpen proletariat, I guess, that they're kind of existing outside of like the regular boundaries of society. Like they're like the dark underbelly of everything, and nobody really cares about them because they're already at the bottom, I guess. And they're not really attempting to. They are the ones that are not really attempting to transcend their position in society, right?
Yeah.
So they don't get punished because they don't even try to break out in a way.
Yeah, they've accepted who they are, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And their role. And in many ways, they're fairly happy, I would say, with everything that happens. They just roll with it. Although I'm not saying they're role models, by the way. I'm just saying compared to everybody else, they never get punished. They do whatever they want.
Yeah, I don't think that's like the moralism the movie was going for.
No.
Like just be like these guys and
just have fun. Never have a job. Just just steal from people and rob and do whatever the hell you want, and you'll get away with it. But actually, one of the leader of the gang, Vinny, he actually does mention he was in prison for a while.
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, that's true.
But that's it. He doesn't seem to be too traumatized by the experience either. To him, it's just part of his lifestyle, I guess. So anyway, we've talked about quite a few of the characters, but we left one for the end, I think. Even if we didn't plan it, but we did leave one for the end. Yeah, the prostitute Tralala, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, played really well by Jennifer Jason Leigh, like an amazing performance.
Oh yeah, she's like the standout performance together with Stephen Lang, who plays Harry.
Yeah,
I think those two are like the definitely the standout performances in this movie.
Yeah, so Tralala is, I think, the example of a woman who didn't accept her role as a mother and a housewife, right? And while coming, I would say, from a working class background, which is safe to assume because she knows everybody in that neighborhood. And she kind of rejected, I would assume, at one point that role of finding a husband, right? Because, somebody would have found a husband for her if she wanted to kind of keep being, white working class. But she rejected that. So she became like a prostitute of sorts, but also a thief. She does a bit of both during the story. And she's like in my opinion, a really interesting character. And from the source material before there was a Last Exit to Brooklyn novel, there was the Tralala short story, right? So I
didn't know that.
Yeah, so she had like a starring role in her own story before it kind of got put together with the rest of the novel. And to me, she's a very interesting character because of it. And one thing that stands out kind of immediately about her is that doesn't seem to be able to form relationships, right? She only sees other people as kind of a means to an end, pretty much. And that end is always about making money and surviving.
And I mean, that's in a way what she's forced to do, because she didn't accept like the predestined role in society that she would have had, right? So she's forced to take care of herself in other capacity, I guess.
Yeah, so she obviously a prostitute and a thief, and I think sometimes it looks like she's more of a thief than a prostitute, to be honest.
She doesn't really have much sex with people in the movie, except for the finale and the end.
Yeah, she's just mostly trying to trick Johns to going into this kind of deserted area where the thugs can attack the soldiers when they're alone, and she will take a cut of the money.
Yeah,
that seems to be her game more than anything else.
Yeah, she also has like a little kid who has a crush on her, following her around. I believe his name is Sal, and he's Donna's brother, I think. I think he's Donna's brother, like another Big Joe's kid. And like she also doesn't really know how to deal with him. Like he's always hanging around trying to impress her, and he's apparently saving up to buy a motorcycle, and he promises her like the first ride on the motorcycle, and she's just whatever, stupid kid, go away. So she really she doesn't seem to be capable of showing affection towards anybody in the movie, basically.
Yeah,
except for on the very end.
Yeah, she kind of sees everybody as a means to an end, which is making money, and then there's one point where she meets somebody she doesn't see as a client. She kind of seduces him as a regular boyfriend, even though she wants to take his money, and it's a soldier shipping out to Korea, and he actually likes her, right? And I can tell you this is not very apparent in the movie, but in the book she actually the soldier actually kind of proposes to her and says, just wait for me, I'll come back, we can get married, etc., etc. And she just goes, all right, give me your money, please. I don't want any of that stuff. Yeah, I just want to. So sad. Yeah, I just want to, to take your money, right? And at the end, when the soldier ships out, he gives her like an envelope, and she thinks, all right, he's gonna pay me for 3 days of sex, right? That we spent together, and the end is just a love note.
Oh yeah, it's just a letter. Yeah,
but
and she's kind of disappointed now.
Yeah, because she can't form relationships. She can't give anything to anybody, right? So for her, the letter means nothing, right? It would only mean if you had like money in it. And this way, she kind of views everybody else as kind of a means to an end. It kind of backfires on her at the end, right? Because at the end, she's lost a lot of money with this guy who didn't give her anything, and she goes back to her old place where she picks up clients, and everybody hates her there because she didn't form any relationships, right? She doesn't belong to any group. She even rejects the companionship or friendship of the other prostitutes, right? To look after each other. The thugs don't like her anymore because she went to spend 3 days in Manhattan and told them to fuck off. So she comes back and she's all alone, and she's trying to get clients, and she can't get clients because there's a lot of prostitutes around, right? So she starts progressively lowering her price, if you will, right? Until her price hits nothing, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, she gets really, really fucking drunk, and then she starts undressing in a really packed bar, basically, and starts screaming, I have the best tits in the West, or something like that.
Yeah, which is what the soldier told her before, I think.
Oh, yeah. And then, it ends up with her getting, like, pretty brutally gang raped in like the same location where she used to, like, lure her Johns to get hit over the head and mocked, essentially, yeah.
So, in my view, she saw everybody else as, like, as money, right? Money she could make from this person, that person. And she saw herself as an asset, right, to get that money. And in that particular evening when she was shit-faced and there were all the prostitutes in the bar anyway with all the soldiers, nobody wanted her, right? So she kept lowering her price, right? Making herself more and more available until her price was nothing, right? And then she was treated like nothing by all these people, all these men. By the way, I'm not excusing their behavior. I'm just kind of explaining what I think the author meant with this, and the way this kind of happened. And
it's basically her fall from grace, I guess you can call it, like where like she hits a hard wall with her lifestyle, and like I don't think, I think the character is meant to be like sympathetic, of course, and like the way I read it is that, she really secretly she wanted to be with the guy who falls in love with her, like the soldier guy, but she's incapable of doing it, and she never outright states this in the movie. I don't know if there's like some stuff about this in the books, but there's a scene where she gets the letter and like she opens the envelope and realizes that it's a love letter, and there's like a visible expression of disappointment on her face, and like that to me it appeared like she, in a way, she kind of secretly wanted to be like the girlfriend of the guy, but she just simply she couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because she has no way, she doesn't know how to form a functioning relationship. And then the scene following after that, where she gets drunk and eventually gang raped, like that almost felt like a form of, you know, self punishment almost, that she's bringing onto herself. And maybe this is me reading into it too much, but you know, that's kind of how it felt like.
Yeah, because in the end, the kid shows up, the kid who has a crush on her. He has like a kindness to her, right? He stops the gang rape and tries to cover her up and everything. So she has like a sweet moment where she kind of hugs him and tells him, you know, everything's going to be okay, etc. And I think maybe that's her arc, right?
Yeah,
so
that's like her catharsis almost, where she, for the first time in the movie, she is showing genuine affection towards somebody.
Yeah. Whereas previously she just kind of dismissed everybody. So it's pretty interesting. So the movie has a happy ending, I guess, when the Union wins in the end. But a lot of these characters go through a terrible time. And I think, you know, in terms of, you know, going back to the introduction of the episode where I was talking about cinema as something that can think philosophically through images, etc., films that show the dark and terrible face of human life, I think this one fits the bill. These people kind of do
definitely
horrible things to each other for the most part, and they do things which ultimately backfire and hurt them, and they never seem to be in control of what they're doing at all.
No, they're basically products of what their conditions are that they've been born into, and like this is like obviously from a more antinatalist perspective. I think this also gives like the subplot with Donna and her baby like a pretty dark twist, I guess, because like that kid is obviously gonna be born into that kind of environment as well, right?
Yeah. And if he's a boy, he's gonna wear a white vest at home, a hat outside, work in the same factory. Well, not because we know what happens to American unions later on, but he's going to have the same job as his father, as his grandfather. And if he's a woman, if he's a girl, she's going to go to school for a little bit and then get pregnant, get a husband. And if this baby doesn't follow either of these roles, they are going to have a terrible life.
Yeah,
a terrible time of life.
Gonna be rejects, essentially. Yeah.
And the baby wasn't planned, you know. The baby's just kind of cast into the world, right? Just another baby cast into the world, into these conditions, you know. I guess that's it. There's nothing more for the baby.
Like the end of the movie is like, I don't know if bittersweet is the right word for it, but that's how I would call it. Like you have like Harry's arc ending and Tralala's arc ending, and both of their fates, they mirror each other in a way. Like they're both like physically broken at the end of the movie, and they both basically fail to transcend the conditions they've been living in, and remain like prisoners of that circumstance.
Yeah,
so.
But I think the way the story ends with the baby being baptized, right?
The baptism and then of course the workers returning to the factory.
Yeah,
that's
I think that's just a way of saying, and this story will happen again. You know, these stories will happen again, right? Because there's always more people being born into this.
I mean, that's basically if somebody were to ask me like, how would you describe like the bottom line of this movie, that's basically this thing, that everybody is a victim in a way of their own condition, and that these material conditions, you cannot escape them by willpower alone. And then you have the subplot of the union, of course, which is one of the things that are positive about the movie, because the strike action ends and it is implied that, you know, the workers got their demands. So it implies that while you cannot directly transcend these conditions, you can at least try to change them by means of political struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think what is the bottom line of the movie, to me at least.
So this movie was made in 1989. I think if somebody was adapting this in current contemporary times, this probably would have been like a TV series, in my opinion. Because
probably with the branching storylines and stuff. Yeah,
with the multiple storylines and trying to develop the characters a little bit more, right?
There's also some of the characters are maybe a bit underwritten. Like the union representative guy is not much of a character at all.
Yeah, and we never know. We barely know anything about where, say, Harry Black comes from, right? We just know a little bit about his home life, but we don't know if he was always like a union guy or if he wasn't, how he rose through the ranks, I guess, or what his relationship is to the whole working business, because he seems not to identify that much with his colleagues, not just because of being homosexual or whatever, and being kind of attracted to fancy restaurants and fancy clothes. He seems also to be the kind of guy who barely works, but likes to talk a lot about how hard he works.
Yeah. He's definitely like a boastful guy, and he's also not really working at his strike office. He's just buying people beers and wants
being popular.
Wants the attention.
Yeah, being popular. Yeah. Okay, so definitely if you like our podcast and if you have the type of kind of pessimistic outlook, I would say that for the people who like our podcast, I would say check out this movie, even though we completely spoiled it for you. But it's probably still worth watching because the performances are overall pretty good, and it's kind of a slice of life from a part of the world in a specific period of time that it's very possible that you know nothing about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of spoilers and stuff, I mean, the movie doesn't really have that much plot going on anyways. I mean, obviously there is some kind of plot, but it's not that much, and that it doesn't rely on like big plot reveals or anything like that. So it's definitely a movie you can watch even though you've been spoiled.
Definitely worth checking out. It's very well shot as well.
Oh yeah,
I like the photography was really good.
Yeah, like the director Uli Edel, he did a bunch of other movies I also really enjoy, like the Christiane F. movie, which is also based on a book and which plays in a kind of similar milieu, but just a couple of years later. He also made the Bader-Meinhof complex, which was about the RAF terrorists in Germany, which was like a Maoist insurgency group in Germany. And he also directed, I believe, a Twin Peaks episode or something like that.
Oh, that's a very diverse.
So he's a very accomplished guy.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all from us for this week. We'll be seeing you next week with the second part of our Hubert Selby Jr. double header movie, and we're going to talk about Requiem for a Dream. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, and talk to you guys next week. Bye bye.